The message arrived during a budget meeting. Admiral Susan Morgan was arguing for increased funding for the Jupiter defense grid when her aide rushed in, face pale. The large screen at the front of the room flickered, and the image of a Viridian appeared. Its scaled skin shimmered under bright lights, 4 eyes blinking independently of each other. "People of Earth," the alien spoke in a voice that sounded like rocks grinding together. "The period of peace is over. The 3,000 years of truce we granted you has expired today. The Viridian Collective hereby declares war on humanity. Prepare for your extinction." The room fell silent. The 12 military officers and government officials stared at the screen. Then, unexpectedly, Admiral Morgan smiled. "Well," she said, setting down her tablet, "it's about time." Lieutenant Commander Paul Evans glanced at his superior with surprise. She didn't seem worried at all. In fact, none of the high-ranking officials looked concerned. A few were even checking their watches, as if the declaration of war was simply another item on their daily schedule. "Send the wake-up call," Admiral Morgan ordered. Evans nodded and tapped a series of commands into his wrist computer. Across the solar system, hidden systems began to activate. "Admiral," Evans said, "should we alert the public? There will be panic." Morgan shook her head. "Follow the protocol, Paul. The one we've practiced for generations." Evans nodded. Every officer knew the protocol. Every citizen had participated in the drills, though most believed they were simply civil defense exercises. The door opened again, and Ambassador Gregory Allen walked in. He had been recalled from the Galactic Conclave after the Viridians had made their dramatic announcement there as well. "They think they've caught us by surprise," Ambassador Allen said, straightening his uniform. 3,000 years building up their forces, and they expect us to be sleeping." He laughed softly. Morgan stood and walked to the window. From the United Earth Defense Headquarters in Washington, D.C., she could see people walking in the streets below, going about their day, unaware that war had just been declared. "Get me the president," she said. 5 minutes later, President Julia Ramirez appeared on the screen. She was already in the secure bunker beneath the White House. "The Viridians finally did it," President Ramirez said. "Has Operation Long Watch been activated?" "Yes, Madam President. The wake-up call has been sent." "Good. Our ancestors would be proud." Evans watched the exchange with growing curiosity. He had been briefed on Operation Long Watch when he reached his position, but many details were still classified even to him. After the call ended, he approached Admiral Morgan. "Ma'am, permission to speak freely." "Granted. You all seem ready for this, almost like you were expecting it today." Morgan smiled. "Not today specifically, but soon. The truce was for 3,000 years. Our analysts predicted they would attack immediately after it expired. The Viridians are nothing if not punctual. But how can we fight them? The public doesn't even know. The public doesn't need to know yet. And as for fighting them," she nodded to a junior officer who brought up a new display. It showed the solar system, with thousands of dots appearing throughout it, representing hidden military assets. "We've had 3,000 years to prepare, Paul. What do you think we've been doing all this time?" Evans stared at the display in amazement. The number of military assets was staggering. "I need to check the old records," he said. "There's something about all this that doesn't add up." "Go ahead," Morgan said. "Level 10 clearance has just been granted to all senior officers. You'll find what you're looking for in the first contact archives." As Evans left, he heard Morgan speaking quietly into her communicator. "Begin Phase 2. The Viridians have declared war exactly as predicted. Deploy the Mercury fleet. Wake the Europa base." She paused, then added, "and inform the Mars colonies that their true purpose will now be revealed." Outside, the sun shone on an ordinary day. But beneath the surface of human civilization, a war machine 3,000 years in the making was finally stirring to life. Dr. Laura Phillips brushed dust from the ancient paper document. The archives beneath Washington, D.C. held the true history of humanity's first encounter with the Viridians. She had studied this era for decades, but today was different. Today, the classified files were finally open to her. "Find anything useful?" Captain Benjamin Hayes asked as he entered the dimly lit room. His uniform was crisp, his posture perfect, but his eyes showed the same excitement Laura felt. "Yes," she said, pointing to the document. "This is the original peace treaty, the one signed 3,297 years ago." Hayes leaned over her shoulder. "The truce that just ended." "Exactly. But look at Article 7. The captain read aloud. "This peace shall last for exactly 3,000 years, after which the Viridian Collective reserves the right to resume hostilities without further notice." "They wrote their intention to attack us directly into the treaty," Laura said. "And we signed it anyway, when we were nearly destroyed in that first war." Laura nodded and moved to another table where a small black cube sat. She pressed her palm against it, and a holographic figure appeared, an elderly man in an ancient military uniform. "AI construct, Winston. Active," the figure said. "Historical database online." "Winston, tell us about the end of the First Viridian War," Laura requested. The AI's eyes seemed to look into the distance. Earth forces were decimated. Humanity faced extinction. The Viridians controlled most of the solar system. Their technology was centuries beyond ours. "So why did they offer a truce?" Hayes asked. "They believed humans were not worth the effort to completely destroy," Winston replied. The Viridian Supreme Commander stated, and I quote, "These primitives will never be a threat. We grant them time to witness our growing power before we return to finish them." Laura pulled up more documents. "But look at these internal memos from our leaders at that time. They weren't desperate at all." Hayes read the faded text. "The 3,000-year window is exactly what we need. Accept their terms without hesitation." Another document showed calculations, population growth, technological development rates, resource requirements. Someone had planned very carefully. "They knew," Laura whispered. "Our ancestors knew the Viridians would return and planned for it from the beginning." Winston's hologram nodded. "Correct. After the treaty was signed, humanity began the longest preparation for war in known history. The generational plan was created." "The what?" Hayes asked. Laura pulled up another file. "Every generation since then has had one task: to advance human technology and build our strength in secret, all while appearing to be developing at a normal pace. Permission to share classified visual file G394, Winston asked. "Granted," Laura said. The air filled with images, vast underground factories on Mars, hidden shipyards in the moons of Jupiter, weapons development facilities beneath the oceans of Earth. "For 3,000 years, Winston explained, approximately 30% of all human productivity has been secretly directed toward military preparation. Each generation added their contribution." Hayes stared at the images in amazement. "But how did they keep this secret? Trillions of people over thousands of years." "It was hidden in plain sight," Laura said. "The moon colonies, mostly military training facilities, the Mars terraforming project, cover for building factories and bases, the Jupiter mining operations, actually producing warships. And the Viridians never suspected. Our public development appeared normal," Winston said. "We allowed them to monitor our open channels. We even sent out signals showing our struggles with basic space travel. Meanwhile, the real work happened elsewhere." Laura gathered the documents. "We need to bring these to Admiral Morgan. They confirm everything. The original strategy has worked exactly as planned." As they prepared to leave, Winston's hologram spoke again. "Captain Hayes, Dr. Phillips, there is one more thing you should know." They turned back to the eye. "The leaders who signed that treaty knew something else about the Viridians, something that gave them confidence in this plan." "What was it?" Laura asked. "The Viridians cannot comprehend long-term planning beyond a few generations. Their psychology makes them incapable of maintaining focus across millennia. They simply assumed humans thought the same way. Hayes smiled slowly. So when they gave us 3,000 years, they never imagined, Winston said, that we would use every single day of it to prepare for their return. The ground shook on Mercury. Deep beneath the planet's surface, massive machines rumbled to life. Engineer Catherine Wright watched through thick glass as factory lines began moving for the first time in decades. Each line had been maintained by generations of engineers, kept ready for this day. Power levels at 100%, she reported into her comm. Mercury Defense Production Facility is fully operational. On her screen, confirmation messages appeared from similar facilities across the small planet. The factories that tourists thought were simple mining operations were now revealing their true purpose. Begin production sequence, Catherine ordered. Priority Alpha weapons first. Across the solar system, General Frank Rodriguez stood on the observation deck of Mars Defense Command. Below him, the red Martian soil split open as hidden doors revealed launch tubes. Weapons that had been built years ago and kept in perfect condition were now being loaded onto massive elevators. Status report, he demanded. All systems active, sir, his aide replied. The defense grid is powering up. Orbital platforms are emerging from camouflage mode. Rodriguez nodded. The platforms had been disguised as ordinary satellites or research stations. Now they were transforming, weapon systems extending, shields activating. What about the civilian population? Rodriguez asked. Evacuation to the deep shelters is proceeding as planned. Most people think it's just another drill. The general watched as more doors opened across the Martian landscape. It's remarkable, he said quietly. 3,000 years of preparation, and not one person broke silence. Each generation only knew their part, sir, his aide reminded him. The full plan was only known to a select few. In the cold darkness beyond Jupiter, Vice Admiral Joseph Carter floated in the command center of Europa Base. The entire moon of Europa had been hollowed out over centuries, its interior transformed into the largest shipyard humanity had ever built. Release the docking clamps, Carter ordered. Outside, in the giant underwater hangar beneath Europa's ice shell, hundreds of massive warships began to move. They had been built in sections over decades, assembled in secret, and kept dormant. Now their lights flickered on, engines warming up. Fleet status, Carter asked. All ships reporting ready, Admiral. Crews are boarding now. The crews had trained for this moment their entire lives. Many were the descendants of people who had trained for the same purpose, never seeing actual combat, but keeping the skills alive through generations. Begin deployment sequence, Carter said. Maintain stealth protocols until we reach the rally point. The massive ships began to rise through the water toward hidden exits in Europa's icy surface. Back on Earth, Catherine connected to a secure video conference with Rodriguez and Carter. Admiral Morgan joined them seconds later. Production facilities are at full capacity, Catherine reported. We'll have the first wave of new weapons ready within hours. Mars defenses are online, Rodriguez added. The civilian model satellites are now revealing their military capabilities. And the Jupiter fleet is deploying, Carter said. 300 capital ships and over 1,000 support vessels, all built to counter Viridian technology. Morgan nodded. Good. What about the Neptune array? Coming online now, Rodriguez said. The quantum communication system is active. We can coordinate our forces across the entire system without the Viridians detecting our signals. On screens around the solar system, ordinary citizens watched news reports about the Viridian declaration of war. Many were frightened, believing Earth was unprepared. They didn't know that the taxes they had paid their entire lives had been partially diverted to the war effort. The public transportation systems they used contained hidden military components. The educational system had subtly prepared them for specific roles in a conflict. It's time for Phase 3, Morgan said. Begin the public announcement sequence. Let's show our people what we've really been building all these years. As she spoke, Something moved in the asteroid belt. What appeared to be ordinary rocks began to shift, revealing themselves as disguised battle stations and weapon platforms. Across the solar system, humanity's hidden war machine awakened. The trap 3,000 years in the making was finally ready to spring. Captain Lisa Brown stood on the bridge of the UES Defiant, watching as her small fleet of 5 ships moved into position at the edge of the solar system. According to the plan, they would be the first to meet the Viridian invasion force. "Enemy ships detected," announced her sensor officer. "Large fleet approaching from multiple vectors." Lisa nodded calmly. "How many?" "Over 300 capital ships, Captain. Thousands of smaller vessels." The bridge crew remained focused on their tasks. No one showed fear despite being severely outnumbered. "Open a channel to Admiral Howard," Lisa ordered. The stern face of Admiral Peter Howard appeared on the main screen. He was directing operations from a hidden command center in the Kuiper Belt. "The Viridians have arrived, Admiral," Lisa reported. "They brought a substantial force." Howard nodded. "As expected. Proceed with the greeting protocol, Captain." "Yes, sir." Lisa turned to Communications Officer Daniel Garcia. "Send the welcome message." Garcia pressed several controls on his console. "Channel open, Captain." Lisa stood straight, her face composed. "Attention Viridian Fleet. This is Captain Lisa Brown of the United Earth Ship Defiant. We acknowledge your declaration of war. We are prepared to receive your surrender." There was a long pause before the reply came. Garcia's console lit up with incoming signals. "They're responding, Captain," he said. "Audio and visual." The main screen changed to show a Viridian commander. Its scaled skin had a greenish tint, and its 4 eyes blinked in an unsettling pattern. "Human vessel," the alien said, its voice translated by the ship's computer. "Your insolence is noted. You faced the might of the Viridian Collective. We have spent 3,000 years building this armada specifically to destroy your species." Lisa smiled slightly. "Impressive. We've been busy too." The Viridian commander made a sound that the translator didn't catch. "Your 5 ships are no match for our fleet. Surrender now, and we will make your extinction quick." "I'm afraid we must decline your generous offer," Lisa replied politely. "However, I should warn you that these 5 ships are not our fleet. They're just the welcome committee." She nodded to Garcia, who sent a coded signal back toward the inner solar system. The Viridian commander laughed, a harsh grating sound. "Your deception is pathetic. Our long-range scans show no significant military force in your system. We have monitored your development for 3 millennia. You barely achieved basic space travel." "Yes, we wanted you to think that," Lisa said. "It's amazing what you can hide when you have 3,000 years to perfect your camouflage technology." As she spoke, something strange began to happen on the Viridian sensor displays. Where space had appeared empty moments before, hundreds of signals were now appearing. "What trickery is this?" the Viridian demanded. "No trick," Lisa replied. "Just the first wave of our defense force dropping their stealth fields." Admiral Howard cut into the transmission. "This is Admiral Peter Howard of Earth Defense Command. What you're seeing is approximately 10% of our available forces. The ships that are currently visible were built over 600 years ago and have been waiting in hibernation mode. They are considered obsolete by our current standards, but we thought they'd be adequate for this first encounter." The Viridian commander's 4 eyes widened. "Impossible. You could not have hidden such a fleet." "Our surveillance was exactly what we wanted you to see," Howard interrupted. "Captain Brown, you may proceed with the demonstration." Lisa nodded to her weapons officer. "Single-point defense demonstration, please. Target an uninhabited section of their fleet." A small weapon port opened on the Defiant. A beam of energy, barely visible except for how it distorted the space around it, shot toward the Viridian fleet. It struck an empty area between 3 of their smaller vessels. The space seemed to fold in on itself, creating a sphere of distorted reality that quickly collapsed, taking a significant chunk of empty space with it. That was a point defense weapon designed specifically to counter Viridian shield technology, Lisa explained calmly. It's an old model, about 500 years out of date, but it should illustrate our point. On the screen, the Viridian commander was speaking rapidly to its officers off-screen. Their signals were being intercepted and translated by Communications Officer Garcia. "They're confused, Captain," Garcia reported with a slight smile. "They're saying it's impossible. They're ordering deep scans of the entire system." Lisa nodded. "They're about to get a much bigger surprise." Commander Ryan Murphy watched as the Viridian ships deployed their main weapon systems. From his position in the Weapons Control Center on Titan, he had a perfect view of the battle unfolding across multiple screens. "They're using ion pulse cannons," he noted to his team, "exactly as our simulations predicted." The Viridian fleet fired upon the human defenders. Brilliant blue energy beams cut through space, heading toward the Earth ships. Then something unexpected happened. The beams seemed to curve away from their targets, bending as if drawn to invisible magnets scattered throughout the battlefield. "Energy redirection systems working perfectly," Ryan reported. On another screen, Dr. Nicole Green studied the incoming data about the Viridian biology. Her lab on Ganymede had spent decades analyzing the few Viridian samples collected over the centuries. "Their neural systems are still vulnerable to pulse frequency disruption," she confirmed. "Just as our models suggested." Ryan nodded. "Excellent. Deploy the PN series countermeasures." Throughout the human fleet, small drones launched from the larger ships. They emitted invisible waves that caused immediate confusion among the Viridian crews. The alien ships began to move erratically, some firing weapons in random directions. "The frequency disruptors are working," Nicole said, watching her monitors. "It's causing their neural networks to misfire. Not harmful, but very disorienting." In space, Lieutenant Eric Daniels sat in the cockpit of his fighter. Unlike traditional spacecraft, his vessel was directly linked to his nervous system. When he thought about moving left, the ship moved left. The neural interface allowed reactions thousands of times faster than any manual control system. "Phoenix Squadron, deploy," came the order through his comm system. Eric and 20 other pilots launched from their carrier ship. Their small, sleek vessels moved with impossible speed and precision. To an observer, they would appear to teleport from one position to another, their movements too quick for the eye to track. The Viridian fleet launched their own fighters in response. Large, heavily armored vessels that had been the terror of the galaxy for millennia. They were no match for the human fighters. Eric's squadron danced between them, moving faster than the Viridian targeting systems could track. "These are too easy," Eric commented as he disabled his 5th Viridian fighter. "Their technology hasn't evolved much in 3,000 years. "That's because they thought they were already the most advanced species," Ryan replied over the comm. "They had no reason to push their development further." On her screen, Nicole watched as the Viridian flagship tried to coordinate a counterattack. "They're attempting to adapt their shields to our weapons," she reported. "Let them," Ryan said confidently. "Those countermeasures were developed 500 years ago. We've moved well beyond them." He pressed a series of commands on his console. Throughout the human fleet, weapon systems began to shift to secondary configurations. "Changing to Phase 2 weapons," he announced. "These were specifically designed to penetrate the adaptations they're making now." The human ships fired again. This time, the weapons looked completely different, pulses of golden energy that passed through the Viridian shields as if they weren't there. Nicole checked her data. "The targeted systems are shutting down as expected. Non-lethal, as ordered." In his fighter, Eric received new targeting data. "They're trying to retreat and regroup," he reported. "Should we pursue?" Ryan consulted with Admiral Howard, then responded, "Negative. Let them pull back. They need time to realize what they're facing." On the main command screen, they could see the Viridian ships withdrawing to a safe distance. Their formation was in disarray, their once perfect attack pattern now scattered. "What do you think they're saying to each other right now?" Eric asked with a slight smile. Nickel studied the intercepted communications. They're confused. They expected us to be using technology similar to what we had when the truce was signed. They can't understand how we leaped so far ahead. Ryan nodded. That was always the plan. While they watched our public space program struggle with basic rockets, our real development was happening out of sight. 3,000 years of focused research and development, Nickel added, all aimed at countering their specific technology. And they never suspected a thing, Eric said, guiding his fighter back to its carrier. Because who plans for 3,000 years? Ryan looked at the retreating Viridian fleet with satisfaction. Humans do. That's what they never understood. 1 mile beneath the Pacific Ocean, President Julia Ramirez walked through the hidden command center that had existed for thousands of years. Each leader of United Earth had known about this place, passing the knowledge to their successor. The walls were lined with technology from every era of human history, from ancient computer terminals to modern holographic displays. Madam President, we're ready for your address, an aide said, gesturing to a simple podium. Julia nodded and stepped forward. Cameras activated, broadcasting her image to every human settlement across the solar system. The speech she was about to give had been planned for generations, updated by each era to reflect the current language and culture, but always preserving the core message. People of Earth and her colonies, she began, her voice steady. Today, I speak to you about the true nature of our civilization for the past 3,000 years. On screens throughout human territory, people stopped to watch. In homes, workplaces, public squares, and even military vessels, humans turned their attention to the president's words. The Viridian Collective has declared war on humanity, ending the truce that has existed for 3 millennia. Many of you fear we are unprepared. I am here to tell you that we have never been more ready for this moment. Behind her, a massive screen displayed images of the hidden military installations, now revealing themselves throughout the solar system. Since the day the first truce was signed, humanity has been preparing for this war. Every generation has contributed to the plan. The taxes you paid, the scientific advances you celebrated, the infrastructure you used, all served a dual purpose. In another part of the command center, Secretary William Collins opened an ancient vault. Inside was a book, a physical paper book, that contained the original generational plan. He carefully placed it on a scanner, and its pages appeared on screens beside the president's broadcast. This is the generational plan, Julia continued, gesturing to the document. Created by our ancestors and followed faithfully for 3,000 years. Every major decision in human history since the First Viridian War has been guided by this plan. Not through force or control, but through careful stewardship by those entrusted with its secrets. The screen changed to show the early battles with the Viridians, how human forces had easily countered their attacks. As you can now see, our military technology far exceeds what the Viridians expected. This was always our strategy, to appear less advanced than we truly were. While they watched our public space program struggle with simple challenges, our real development happened in secret. In a secure room nearby, the strategic AI known as Athena processed data from the ongoing conflict. Unlike simpler computer systems, Athena was the culmination of thousands of years of AI research. Her consciousness spanned the entire solar system through quantum networks. I would like to introduce you to someone, the president said. This is Athena, the strategic planning intelligence that has been running simulations of this conflict for over 2,000 years. A gentle female voice spoke through the broadcast. Greetings, people of Earth. I have been working in the background of your civilization since my creation. I have run 7.2 billion simulations of this exact scenario, refining our response with each iteration. The president continued. Athena has helped guide our preparations, ensuring we developed exactly the right technologies to counter the Viridian threat. Secretary Collins stepped forward, holding a tablet displaying the current phase of the plan. Madam President, we have confirmed that all elements of the generational plan through Phase 5 have been successfully implemented. Humanity's victory is statistically assured. Julia nodded. The plan was never just about military victory. Our ancestors understood something profound about humanity that the Viridians could never grasp. While they saw the 3,000-year truce as simply a delay before our destruction, we saw it as an opportunity. The screen showed images of daily human life throughout the centuries: families, communities, art, and scientific discovery. Our greatest achievement was not building weapons or ships, Julia said. It was creating a civilization that could maintain focus across thousands of years while still living normal, meaningful lives. Each generation did their part, then passed the torch to their children. She looked directly into the camera, her expression serious but hopeful. The Viridians believe they are fighting the same primitive humans they encountered 3,000 years ago. They are about to discover how wrong they are. Supreme Admiral Zorax paced the bridge of the Viridian command vessel. The massive ship, over 5 miles long, had been the pride of the collective for centuries. Now, it felt vulnerable. How is this possible? He demanded, his 4 eyes blinking rapidly in distress. The humans were barely able to reach their own moon when we last observed them. His intelligence director, Mollux, reviewed the incoming data with growing alarm. It appears they concealed their true development from us, Admiral. Our surveillance was compromised. Compromised? For 3,000 years. Zorax's scales darkened with anger. Impossible. Mollux brought up footage from the recent battles. Human ships moved with impossible speed and precision. Their weapons penetrated Viridian defenses as if they weren't there. Most disturbing of all, they seemed to know exactly how Viridian technology worked and precisely how to counter it. The evidence suggests they have been studying us extensively, Mollux said quietly. While we believed we were watching them, they were actually watching us. Zorax slammed his clawed hand against a console. No species thinks in terms of thousands of years. It defies all logic. On another deck of the massive vessel, a human prisoner sat calmly in an interrogation chamber. The Viridians had captured her from a disabled transport ship. Captain Olivia Simmons showed no fear as her captors entered the room. "You will tell us how humans managed to develop such technology," the Viridian interrogator demanded. Olivia smiled slightly. "We used the time you gave us wisely. No civilization maintains focus for 3,000 years. The interrogator insisted. Your short lives make such planning impossible. That's where you're wrong, Olivia replied. We passed the responsibility from generation to generation. Each did their part, then taught their children to do the same. The interrogator's translator struggled with her next words. But individual glory, personal gain, did these not disrupt your plans? Those were accounted for in the plan, Olivia explained. Our ancestors understood human nature. They didn't fight it. They worked with it. Competition drove innovation. Personal ambition was channeled toward the greater goal. In another part of the ship, Viridian technicians examined captured human technology. Their confusion grew with each discovery. This material doesn't match anything in our database, one technician reported. It appears to be engineered at the molecular level. And this circuitry, another added, it responds to neural patterns. It's as if it was specifically designed to be incompatible with our biology. Back on the bridge, reports flooded in from across Viridian territory. Mallux's eyes widened as he processed the information. Admiral, we're receiving distress calls from 17 colony worlds, he reported. Rebellions have erupted simultaneously across our empire. The subjugated species are revolting, using advanced weapons of human design. Human design? Zorax roared. How could they distribute weapons throughout our territory? Mollux hesitated before answering. It appears they have had operatives among us for centuries, disguised to look like various species from our worlds. The implications were staggering. While the Viridians had been watching Earth's public development, humans had been infiltrating the Viridian collective, studying their weaknesses, and preparing their subject races for rebellion. Their patience is unnatural, Zorax whispered. In the interrogation room, Olivia continued her explanation to the increasingly disturbed Viridian. "You thought your time scale would be incomprehensible to us," she said, "but humans have always thought in terms of legacy, what we build for our children, and their children after them. We've constructed wonders that took longer than a single human lifetime to complete. We've written books meant to be read centuries after the author's death. 3,000 years was simply a longer version of what we already understood." The Viridian interrogator stepped back, unnerved by her calm confidence. "You were so certain of your superiority," Olivia continued. "You never considered that we might view your generous 3,000-year truce as a gift. Time was all we needed, and you gave it to us." On the bridge, Supreme Admiral Zorax made a difficult decision. "Prepare a communication to Earth. Request diplomatic channels." His officers stared in shock. The mighty Viridian Collective had never requested diplomacy. They had always demanded surrender. "The humans," Zorax said quietly, "are not what we thought they were." The grand hall of the Galactic Conclave glittered with light reflecting off the crystalline walls. Representatives from 100 different species sat in rising tiers around the central speaking floor. Ambassador Gregory Allen stood calmly at the center, his simple blue uniform a contrast to the elaborate dress of the alien diplomats. 1 week had passed since the Viridian surrender. After just 3 days of combat, the once mighty collective had requested peace talks. Now the terms were being presented to the gathered representatives of galactic civilization. "The United Earth offers the following terms to the Viridian Collective," Gregory announced, his voice carrying throughout the hall. "First, immediate freedom for all subjugated species within Viridian territory. Second, reduction of the Viridian military to defensive capabilities only. Third, open borders and free trade with all neighboring systems." A murmur ran through the assembled delegates. These terms were surprisingly lenient. Many had expected humans to dismantle the Viridian civilization entirely after such a decisive victory. The Viridian representative, still visibly humbled by recent events, stepped forward. "The terms are acceptable, but we must ask why the humans show such restraint. Your victory was total. You could demand much more." Gregory smiled. "This was never about revenge. Our ancestors did not spend 3,000 years planning just to become conquerors. They had a greater vision: galactic stability and peace." From her seat among the Earth delegation, Admiral Susan Morgan watched the proceedings with satisfaction. The plan had worked perfectly. Every prediction made by their ancestors had come true. Every strategy had succeeded. Humans had revealed only a fraction of their true capabilities, enough to win the war quickly but not enough to frighten potential allies. "The true victory was never military," Gregory continued. "It was creating a balance of power that benefits all species." On the highest tier of the hall, representatives from species that had long feared the Viridians watched with growing hope. For millennia, the collective had been the dominant power, bullying smaller civilizations and extracting resources from weaker worlds. Now, a new protector had emerged. Earth extends an invitation to all worlds, including the Viridian Collective, to join a new galactic council, Gregory announced. "Equal representation, mutual defense, and shared prosperity will be its founding principles." Later, as the delegations mingled during a reception, representatives from a dozen worlds approached Susan and Gregory. "How did humans achieve this?" asked a delegate from the Proxima system. "No one has stood against the Viridians for 10,000 years." "We were patient," Susan replied simply. "And we understood something the Viridians never did. True strength comes from cooperation, not domination." Gregory nodded in agreement. "Our ancestors realized that defeating the Viridians was only the first step. Building something better afterward was always the true goal." When they returned to Earth, Susan received the highest honors her civilization could bestow. In a ceremony broadcast across human territory, she accepted a medal that had been created specifically for this moment, 3,000 years earlier. "I accept this honor not for myself," she said, "but on behalf of every generation that came before us." They never saw the fruits of their labor, but they worked faithfully nonetheless. Later that evening, Susan stood in a quiet memorial garden dedicated to the architects of the generational plan. Monuments honored their foresight and dedication. She placed her medal at the base of the central monument. "We did it," she whispered to her ancestors. As she walked away, her communication device signaled an incoming message. It was from the Strategic Planning Division. Admiral Morgan. The message read, "Preliminary analysis suggests the Andromeda Coalition may pose a significant threat within the next 500 years. Request permission to begin long-term preparation strategies." Susan smiled to herself. The cycle was beginning again. Another potential threat, another long-term plan. Humanity would do what it had always done best, look to the distant future and prepare accordingly. She typed a simple reply. "Permission granted. Let's get to work." Throughout human space, life returned to normal. People went about their daily business, raised families, created art, and pursued knowledge. But now there was a deeper understanding of their place in history. Each generation was a link in an unbroken chain stretching both backward and forward in time. And somewhere, in secure facilities throughout the solar system, plans were already being made for threats that might not emerge for thousands of years.